Lord, take me where you want me to go. Let me meet who you want me to meet. Tell me what you want me to say, and please keep me out of your way. Amen. Please be seated. This morning, we're going to look at our gospel lesson about the feeding of the 5,000, a very famous miracle of Jesus. This miracle is told in all four gospels, and you'll remember that I have mentioned in the past that the three, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, are the synoptic gospels, and they're very similar. Each one of them contains about 90% of the same stories. But John, the Gospel of John, is different. It's 80% unique. So in other words, only 20% of the stories found in the other three Gospels are found in John. But this is one of the 20%. So it just goes to show you how big this miracle was, that it would press upon John to make sure it was included in his Gospel. The stories in all four of the Gospels about the feeding of the 5,000 is pretty similar in setup and outcome to what I just read. But there are a few more, I feel, very important details that are shared in the Gospel of John that are not in Matthew. So it's John's version of this story that I want to focus on this morning. In John, we hear the names of the disciples that are in conversation with Jesus. They're unnamed in the other three Gospels. It's the disciple Andrew who says to Jesus, "There is a boy here who had 5 barley loaves and 2 fish, but what are they among so many?" Only in John do we know that the person who has what Jesus needs to make this miracle is a little boy. But what are they among so many? Isn't that truly an age-old question? We look what we have seen so many times, so much need, and we ask ourselves, but what are they among so many? This boy, this child, if you will, did not realize how much he had until he gave it over to the Lord. Sure, he saw that he had 5 loaves and 2 fish, but the Lord saw it as a gift to be used to feed countless hungry people. The Lord made much of what that little boy was willing to give. Notice who did all the action in this lesson. It's Jesus and this little boy. Now, granted, I'm sure his mother packed his bag with those 5 loaves of fish, or bread and 2 fish, for a day-long feeding for a growing young boy. But it's an interesting lesson here because, for me, it shows the faith of this boy. No doubt hungry, as all boys are 24/7. He was about to turn over what he had to Jesus, for Jesus to use his power to expand these gifts to some greater purpose. And notice how all of this begins. The crowds had gathered, and it was time to eat. The crowds numbered 5,000 men, not counting women and children, because remember, they didn't count for much in Jesus' day. 5,000 men, plus their wives and all of their children, no doubt was a crowd big enough to fill a stadium. And Jesus says to Philip, "How are you to buy bread so that these people can eat?" Jesus turns the question back around to his disciples. And then notice the response that Philip makes in the Gospel of John. He says, "We only have 200 denarii." He opens his little purse bag and looks in, and 200 denarii are not going to buy bread for 5,000 men, plus the women and the children. Philip never once asked Jesus what to do about this situation. Philip never turns to Jesus and asks him to do something. He relies on what he sees, his own resources, that tiny little purse bag that he is carrying for the disciples. And because of that, he fails to see what can indeed be done. Here's yet another example, in my opinion, of the disciples being so human. Philip is like so many of us. We rely on our own resources. We rely on me, myself, and I, so that when the tough situations of life come along, we have a difficult time coping with them. Philip viewed the situation as completely hopeless, even though Jesus, the miracle maker, was right beside him. He didn't turn to him for the answer. Philip could not see that Jesus could have helped this situation. Philip could not see beyond his own power to do something with the limited physical resources that he had. Because, you see, Philip simply could not see beyond his own power. He could not help this situation. Many times you and I are just like Philip, aren't we? We see need, we look at our resources, and we decide that we are overwhelmed, powerless to help, so we don't do anything. We never think of turning our resources over to Jesus. We never think that maybe, just maybe, he can do something with our meager gifts in a way that we could never think of doing. Our faith, just like Philip's faith, is in the power of Jesus to change situations, is so often lacking. We'd rather trust our own resources, trust what we can see, our own power, our own pride, and maybe even fail, instead of turning everything over to Jesus to work a miracle. Now let's look at the disciple Andrew. Whole different story going on here. Andrew saw the exact same problem that Philip saw. He saw all these hungry people, and he knew there wasn't enough money in that purse to feed them. So Andrew went out into the crowd to see what could be done. And he found that boy with his knapsack and his all-day long picnic lunch made so lovingly by his mother. It was only enough food to feed one hungry, growing boy. But Andrew does not give in to despair, seeing things as hopeless like Philip did. Instead, he goes and he takes the boy to Jesus and tells him what he has found. I would imagine Andrew might have had thoughts similar to this. Well, this boy only has a limited amount of food, but maybe, just maybe, Jesus can do something with it. Yes, I will tell Jesus if he can calm down an angry sea, if he can heal people, if he can turn water into wine, surely he can do something with this bread and these two little fish. So Andrew takes his knowledge of Jesus, his resources, and his imagination to Jesus. Now note that I said the word imagination. That's huge here. Right here, Andrew serves as another example for us, one of imagination. He's creative enough to imagine that Jesus might have an answer that the disciples haven't thought of. He turns over to Jesus what he has found, and he lets Jesus control the resources. Then notice what Jesus does with those seemingly limited resources. He turns little into much. Jesus takes just 5 small loaves and 2 little fish, and he turns it into enough food to feed thousands of men, women, and children, In fact, there are 12 baskets of leftovers afterwards. Andrew knew that Jesus could do something very special with the limited resources that were present. And I believe there's a lesson in this for us. When we turn over to the Lord our resources that He has given us indeed, He will use those resources to further His kingdom in ways that we can't even comprehend. Andrew really wasn't quite sure what Jesus could do, I'm sure, or how this meager knapsack of food could help this crowd. But it's important to note, with his own human doubts, even with his wondering, he still gave over those resources to Jesus. He still surrendered his will to Christ. You and I are called upon by Jesus to do the very same thing. Even if we cannot understand what Jesus will do with our resources, even if we think that we have too little to help, we must have faith that Jesus can and will do something special with our gifts. You remember the story in the Bible about the widow's mite, the mite being the smallest of coins in Israel? She gave that smallest coin that she had, the only one that she had, to Jesus. And he said that her gift was special because she gave everything back to Christ. She was willing to turn her resources over to God so that God, in His mysterious way, could do something very, very special with it. It's this kind of faith and trust in God that we're called upon to possess. It is this thinking that everything we have is a gift from the Creator, and it's our responsibility to give to Him those resources that He's given to us so that He can use them for His kingdom. He doesn't want us to give with strings attached, with conditions. He wants our free gifts. He wants our time, our talent, and our treasure given because of the love that we have for Him. He doesn't want them because we think that we're influencing Him, buying His favor in our lives, or because we think we will achieve a greater reward in the afterlife. No, God wants our gifts because that is our way to respond to His great love in our lives. We tend to look at ourselves as people who have worked hard to get everything we have by ourselves. I know I do. Sure, most of us have worked hard to reach the kind of level of living that we have. But just think about those gifts, those talents, those people in your life who were there when you needed maybe a helping hand or an encouraging word or a piece of advice. All of those kinds of things, I feel, are God's hands working in our lives. So yes, we have made ourselves what we are, but at the same time, we have not done it alone, because God's hand was there guiding the process, whether we were aware of it or not. Isn't it appropriate for us to give back to Him some of what He has so generously given to us? Now, at this point, I know you're thinking to yourself, gee, this sounds like a stewardship sermon, doesn't it? You're probably saying to yourself by now, but Father Jim, this isn't stewardship season. It's not October. Why are you sticking your hand out for money right now? Well, the fact is, we are always called to think of our stewardship of resources trusted to us by God, stewardship season or not. And this story, which comes up every summer, is a perfect example of the reminder of that. It's what the lesson is all about. giving back to God what he has given to us so that God can make out of little much. Philip saw hungry and didn't know what he could do. Andrew saw the hungry, and he brought a little boy to the Lord, hoping that the Lord could do much with little. He wasn't sure how the Lord could use his gift, his resource, but the little boy gave it to the Lord anyway. And this little boy, our hero in this story, had faith to turn over to Jesus all that he had at that moment. And he trusted Jesus to take care of him, to not let him go away hungry when he did this. And Jesus provided, didn't he? He provided for this boy and for more than 5,000 people. What if all of us turned over our resources to Jesus? What if we surrendered our entire lives, our time, our talent, and our treasure? What if we trusted him to provide for us? Can you imagine what he would do in your lives and in our lives? Just imagine. Amen. Now, I would like to invite Kimberly